Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar. Together we have a very special guest, which is Susie Arenos.
Hi.
And she has a
Shalom.
big long... Shalom, all right, well, shalom. You're a yoga instructor.
I am.
And you're a special ed teacher.
I am.
And you're a massage therapist.
And that too.
All right, so, but without all that, we're going to talk a little about, because we're on the Jewish View, so we have to talk about a little about Israel and your connection. Just to give a little bit of background, your parents, who I knew, and they passed away in the meantime, but I knew them, and they were very, very Jewish-minded, and I know they raised you as a very Jewish-minded young woman, and that leads you to, obviously, to connect it to Israel. So tell about your experience in Israel.
All right. Well, I have two experiences in Israel. I have now been there twice. I first went to Israel as a child in 1968. And we went, back then it was right a year after the war, and my grandfather had wanted to go. My grandfather was from Romania and had one living relative after the Holocaust who had been saved by a neighbor in Romania when he watched her family being killed. She was saved, sent onto a kinder train over to Israel. So my grandfather knew about her. He had a little picture of her. And we went together, my parents, my brother and sister, my cousin, and my grandfather all together, all the way to Israel. When we got to the airport there, my grandfather carried a little passport picture of Sabina, and she was there at the airport carrying a little passport wallet-sized photo of him. And all of a sudden, they found each other. And it was very emotional. And he had always wanted to go back. My grandmother, who was from Poland, said, "Hey, why do you want to go back there for? I was there, it wasn't so nice." She didn't understand anyone wanting to go back to Europe because it took so much to come to America. But we went. I had an amazing experience. As much as I could remember from being a child, there were many experiences, everything. There were so many things that stuck with me, and I always wanted to go back. And I never could seem to have an opportunity to go back. As a teenager in college, I got married young, I had kids young. I never was making my way back and always had that desire to go back to Israel. My parents used to work. My dad was a dentist and volunteered up in the North Galilee at Kfar Blum. Every year he would go for about a month to 6 weeks with my mom until my mother became too ill. And he loved it. He loved living on the kibbutz. He loved Israel. He loved doing his dentistry there. He just loved the whole experience. So I always wanted to go up there and see. So finally, this summer, I had an opportunity to go to Israel as a grown-up. And remarkably, which I took with me, I have file cards from a project I did in 4th grade, the year after I came back from the summer in Israel, and found, looking at that, I hadn't seen that until I came back, and found that I had gone to a lot of the same places that I couldn't quite remember, but when I was there, kind of had memories. So I had an experience this summer as an adult. My brother and his wife and family had lived in Israel for a year in Jerusalem about 7 years ago. So they were going, so it was a good opportunity to meet them there, go with them. We stayed with friends of theirs. We stayed in about, my goodness, half a dozen different places, whether it was people's homes or little inns. And we made it all the way up north to Kfar Blum. Everything about it was incredible for me to go back to Israel, to see it as a grown-up. A lot had changed since 1968, as I remembered it. I met a friend there who is of Iraqi Jewish background, so he took me around areas in Old Jaffa where he had grown up in the 1950s. It was an incredible experience on so many levels. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me.
Well, because maybe we can connect your yoga experience with Israel.
Yes.
I mean, you feel, because yoga, you feel your inner soul. So, I mean, again, it's, I call it parv. I guess neutral is be the best way. Because just because you're in yoga obviously doesn't mean you're Jewish, to say the least. But since you're so Jewish-minded, how did that affect your spiritual awakening in Israel as a Jewish
amazing.
woman?
Absolutely incredible on every level. So for me, I do yoga every morning. That's how I wake up. That's my morning prayer. And anywhere we were, whether it was a hard tiled floor or outside in the grass, I did yoga every day. Very interesting. different spiritual experiences. When we finally got to Jerusalem, I know as a little girl I couldn't wait to get to the wall. This time I was a lot older. We recreated some pictures, my brother and I, that we had done back when I was a little girl. I had been in a serious car accident about 6 years ago, which actually split my head open, right? Sign between thine eyes, which I'll never forget. And when I got to the wall and I put that scar against the wall, there was an inner connection just all the way through. And I just had to weep for quite a while and give thanks for my life. And reminders everywhere. Everywhere I walked, everywhere I went, every fruit I saw, every flower I looked at, every person I met, every story I listened to, everything was incredible to me there. Going to Tzfat, going up that hill, going all the way up, walking around in that little town, everywhere. Felt ancient and holy and beautiful and just remarkable. I loved every bit of it. I just totally felt at home. I actually looked like everyone, which I don't in America that much, so that felt really good and reassuring. Yeah. Things that I found were interesting in Israel culturally. First of all, when you wake up in the morning, and I was always up early doing yoga, you would hear the sound of pigeons. You would, in the trees, high in the trees. Why? Because there's cats everywhere. And you'd hear the meowing and the mating of cats at night, in the morning. Then you'd start to hear the car beeping. Everybody beeps their horn. Then you'd be hearing arguing, because everybody's arguing. It doesn't matter what language. Everybody is arguing. And everything is beeping, and everything's moving fast, and there's a lot of passion. And as I would walk around, I felt totally safe. This summer was very safe. There were times I was walking in the morning on my own in some of the streets in Old Jerusalem, or not Old Jerusalem, but more in Baca area. And I would walk around and you'd see the little rail trail. There'd be people out with their babies on blankets. You'd see old men sleeping in benches. The falafel was going. Things were going. Lots was happening. Fresh food, fresh bread everywhere. It was remarkable. And my Hebrew started coming back, so chatzi, slicha, these were things I used a lot. So,
yes. It's interesting. You say yoga is meditation about inner soul, because you have a body and a soul, but there's also place is interesting, meaning Israel, and you could say a land's a land. All right, some have mountains, and some have valleys. Obviously every land's a little bit different, but to say Israel's special, of course Judaism says that it's a holy land, and even it's interesting. I remember the Lubavitch Rebbe once says even the non-Jews call it a holy land. It's not only us; they say go to the holy land, and it's interesting when you say the Western world, because I just remember I had a woman come to me, and they traditional, went to Israel like a nice Jewish person, but not religious, and she just came back befuddled to me and saying, I went to the Western Wall, and I started crying. And she herself telling me this, I thought to myself, it's a wall. It's just a wall. If you see a movie, you understand why you're crying. A Holocaust Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial. All right, obviously, you feel something emotional, but to go and see a wall, says just an old wall without it's not even a nice building, it's just a wall. And, she was befuddled. I explained to her that you're dealing with something spiritual. There's something beyond just looking at a
There's
wall.
There's an echo to it. There's an echo to it. You can feel it as you're approaching it. I remember as a little girl crying. I was only 9 years old. I had no idea why I was crying when I went to touch it. This time I had prayers that I was writing and putting inside for different people. I wanted some healing. But there's an energy to it. There's just an energy of being there. The second I touched it, especially when I put the sensation of its coldness against my forehead, against my scar, I wept for a long time. I really just needed that. It was very exhausting, but deep, but there's an energy to everything there. When you walk the steps, you're walking on ancient places. You can almost feel the presence, the echo. I call it the echo of the place. I also, even when we got up to Kfar Blum, they've built new places up there. It's now more of like a Catskill resort, almost like the Nevele. It's this big place, brunches. But my parents were there when it was still a kibbutz. And I remember we got lost when we got up there, and we couldn't quite find our way back to where we were staying. And then I stood and I said, you know what? We're supposed to be right here. My father led us here. This is where they used to have their meals. This is where the hay is. This is where the chickens were. We were meant to see this old part of the kibbutz, and there was an echo to it. There was a certain feeling, and I could almost feel my parents' presence and them showing me exactly where to go. And we did eventually find our way to the fancy hotel room. But being there in the old part and seeing the authentic part of the kibbutz where they used to go back in the early 80s, that it meant a lot.
You know, I mean, you're talking about on a different subject how Israel has really blossomed, and not only with the flowers, but just boomed in the...
it's huge. It's amazingly huge. And yet odd to be right across the border from Syria. So here you are, you hear fighter jets in the morning. I'm doing yoga, I see the barbed wire fence, maybe 20 feet away, and people just walking around. It's a very interesting culture.
No, just for our viewers out there, for the tourism part of it.
Right.
I mean, you always hear, again, an oddball thing will get headlines. Yes. I've always said that in so many situations, and it really distorts the major picture. 1 out of 1,000, a meshuggah or a nut comes, and that's also, there's nuts walking around.
In our country, too.
And, that's what I'm saying. Even you could say that nowadays, and I say that many times, but just generally, since you were there without being a newspaper reporter looking for a sensational headline, I mean, did you feel safe there, just for our viewers? People sometimes say,
safe every
Israel,
time.
I heard there's incidents, I don't want to go.
I felt every time. I felt safe everywhere I went, and especially when my friend Ellie took me to where he grew up, which was this now a refugee area where people live in one room, where the streets are narrow, where they're the Iraqi long ovens that they bake their bread in. Because when he came to Israel, his parents, they were generations from Iraq. They were the silent exodus that came over in 1950 camelback, or as his father would say, on the wings of an eagle. And when they came to Israel, they weren't allowed to even speak the Iraqi language anymore. When his mother would sing lullabies, they had to come back to Hebrew, even though she was very religious Jewish. It's interesting what I learned about some of the infighting in Israel culturally, from where you're from, the pecking order of Jews, of Mizrahim, of Ashkenazim, and us American Jews, we're just American Jews. But in Israel, where you come from kind of determines you. And it was interesting to go back to where he grew up and see this area. And now a lot of the people from Sudan, Eritrea, are coming into that area where there's some different refugee and different philanthropic.
Jewish or non-Jewish are you talking
I think
about?
A mix. I think, but we met a fellow who does different like will help these people, will help people who come through. I'm not sure if they're Jewish or not. They're just refugees coming from awful places in northern Africa.
That's why I wanted to know, because they just, it's always so interesting, put in a, idea how generous Israel is. Of course, it's a small country.
All donations.
And really, obviously, it's dear to us.
Yes.
But on the other hand, listen, on the wider scale, it's a holy land, it's dear to us. But on the bigger scale, it's a very minor, small little country.
Yes.
And when somebody, when you hear about a world tragedy, and there's thousands of people without a home.
Right.
So it's not the big, European countries or America. Israel, Israel takes them into one of the smallest countries in the world.
We walked through this area that was just unbelievable, and my friend even asked me, said, "Do you feel unsafe?" And I'm like, "Nope." Well, I had him there, and he knows the area. So we went to Akko. We went to a couple of Arab-owned areas that he said he likes to support because he likes to have peace. And it was very interesting. Things I would have never known, I learned through him. So there were so many components to my trip to Israel, being with my family, being with friends, just learning some of the culture and the diversity of the culture. And again, taking in refugees because when he was little in the 1950s, that was the refugee area for the 30,000 Iraqi Jews that came across. It's amazing to think of that. And yet, that's what happened when Israel became a country. People were coming in. So,
again, that's just for our viewers. I mean, of course, I know the Israel history, but just, you talk about now, obviously, it's a big issue, refugees.
Yes.
And a lot of times, I mean, and really it's very interesting because the Jewish people lived in their Arabic countries.
Yes.
Talking about Syria, you were just mentioning
In
Iraq,
Iraq,
Morocco,
yes.
and Yemen.
Right,
Really,
right.
for thousands of years, literally, and they did get along with their neighbors.
Yes.
And
they were religious.
yeah,
They were
very
able to
traditional,
be.
more
Yeah.
traditional
Oh,
than
yes.
the Ashkenaz
Oh, yes.
European Jews.
Yep.
So it came 1948, and they, for some reason, they're
came,
just say,
yeah.
you know, we don't want you here anymore.
Here, you have your own country. Go,
Yeah.
gay.
So, you
Yeah.
know, but there were, on the other hand, many, you know, hundreds of thousands, maybe a million, you know, refugees from these countries. Again,
Yes.
Iraq, Syria, and Morocco, on, really, all these Arabic countries where they thousands of years. And they, like you say, came on camelback. They came with nothing or practically nothing.
Yep. To
And
make
they
a
made
new
a
life.
good life for themselves. So, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, you can kvetch, you know, like we were using a lot of Yiddish words. You can kvetch about your status in life. Oy vey, you know what they did to me, or pick yourself up and, you know, and make yourself something that you were. And that's,
Yes.
of course, Jewish people. We have that with the Holocaust too. They came out with nothing, and like you were.
Well, that's what
you
happened,
know.
I guess, in early Israel. Is you had all the Holocaust survivors coming in, then you had people from other countries coming in, so there was this real mix of Jews. I guess that's why there's a lot of arguing going on all the time. All the
They
time.
argue even if they.
They argue. There's no nobody's fisticuffs. They just argue. That's all.
Yeah.
They're just debating.
Yeah,
It's a
debating
very
is
debating.
nicer word, yeah.
I like the permission to beep the horn a lot. That was on the cars. Everybody was beeping. But it was very interesting. I learned so much. I really appreciated the culture on all those levels, and just thinking about that mix of Jews from all over, because wherever we go, we take our culture with us. And it was really, I really liked being in the country, and I did feel safe in a multitude of places. So.
I mean, you
Yeah.
said you were a yoga instructor. Did you do any yoga there to instruct? You know, I know a person
Oh, teach
who
a
went
class?
there. Well, I know an American kid. I mean, really was his whole family went
Yes.
there. And that's he made a business out of himself teaching basketball. You know, for here, basketball, baseball, Little League is normal. And so he grew up a little. You know, obviously, everybody grows up. And then he taught Little League or baseball. And he
Nice,
made
very
himself...
nice.
you know, like teams and instructor and organization, so maybe import a little bit of yoga into
I actually
Israel.
asked them up in Kfar Blum, up in Kiryat Shmona, about the need for a yoga teacher and the thought of like, gee, maybe I could come here a month or two out of the year like my dad
Yeah.
did and teach yoga at the spa. So one of the women I met over in Kiryat Shmona was like, absolutely. She goes, we could use a really good yoga teacher up here. It was like, oh, interesting. So yes, there was some of that. And then the other thought was, well, yeah, but Syria is really like a mile away. So
Yeah.
there was a lot to think about. But just that, yes, yoga is popular there too. The young people of Israel are very progressive in terms of yoga, in terms of, my goodness, every house I went to had a water filter. How they're able to take salt water and make fresh water.
Really? From
It was
salt water? Usually water
all
filters
over, just
there
water
is
filters.
normal water, and
I
they
could
wanted
not
to-
believe what every house had. I could not believe when we would drive through desert and then see this lush garden, like huge orchard. I was really impressed with a lot of their scientific developments and our agriculture developments. It was really amazing. A lot of the things I saw and heard about.
So they're really up on these kind of, you know,
Yes.
you say yoga relieves
Yes.
stress.
Yes.
And I know Israelis, well, because, yeah, like you said, the
they
Syrian
could come
border is a
down.
mile
Yeah.
away, you know, and everybody's going into the army, and obviously that's very stressful. It's one thing marching around in the middle of America, but, you know, when you're on a war front, obviously
yeah.
that's super stressful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think yoga would be very popular, and I know it is, especially with young people in Israel. In fact, one of the places we stayed, I was doing yoga every morning, and the fella would be up with me early, and he would just watch. He would just see me moving through the poses, and it would be great. I wonder if the Israeli army actually does any yoga to help strengthen people. I know it's got a similar meditative effect as a martial art, so...
But
Yeah.
when you say strengthen, you meant mentally strengthen or
Physically,
even
both.
physically
Oh,
yoga? I
big
never
time.
said that.
Yes, yes.
Tell
a lot
us
of
about that a little
the
bit.
poses strengthen your muscles, so you become very strong with yoga. Some of the yoga where you're using your arms and your shoulders to support your body weight when you're holding, you hold a pose and you breathe and you hold something. It takes a lot of strength and endurance to do that. So yoga is good for balance. It works on many premises of like a martial art because of how it works through the body, how it's a meditative movement. So it builds a lot of strength.
This news to me.
Oh,
Usually I always
yes.
say maybe flexible. You'd
Flexible,
say,
yes, and then
yeah,
strength,
I never-
great
I would
strength.
never think that.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So you know that if any,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like military people, I mean, then it would be good over
Yeah.
there. A little
Oh, yeah.
lessen stress and
Yes.
give them a little bit
Definitely. Definitely. Useful. Yeah.
extra. I know now it's coming back to me that a few, like, athletes, usually athletes are like your gung-ho kind of guy, but then you hear that they do yoga just
Yes.
to, you know, well,
Lots.
obviously picture, you know, they have to be flexible. I mean, those
Yes.
guys are bending and turning and twisting
And yoga has everything with twisting and strengthening. So in a yoga class, you're going to become flexible. First, you're going to get centered. Then you're going to open up your spine. Then you're going to warm up your muscles. And then you're going to do the poses that strengthen your muscles so that you might be holding your arms up for a while. You might be holding your arms out. You might be supported on your legs in a runner's stretch for a while. You might be dipping up and down so that you're supporting yourself on your arms and then back to your legs. And you move through the spine and you strengthen the muscles around it. Really good for the core strength, good for the back muscles, good for your arms and legs. Yeah.
It's interesting. You know, again,
Yeah.
I work out also, you know, everybody.
You have to
gives
try
me the
yoga.
well, you know, because people say, oh, you're a rabbi. You know, they always think, again, a rabbi only learns. But, you know, well, it says you got to be healthy, too. That's the Torah
Absolutely.
also says you have to be Torah.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I asked a few trainers, give me a few exercises because, you know, my back, like,
Yep.
I'm a real Jew, my back. And, you know.
Because
now I'm
everybody's sitting and
thinking,
studying Talmud. We have to get up a little bit every hour. You should be up.
It's not a bad idea, really.
Yeah.
Isn't. But they should learn a little bit. They get hunched back, and they
Yes,
could
yes.
use that. It really isn't a bad
Be a
idea to
wonderful,
get in
wonderful
there.
to integrate it in.
But he showed me some exercises, and now I'm thinking maybe they were a little bit yogic.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking he didn't say that. He just says, "Here, I give you a few exercises to strengthen yourself, your arms, and you know,
Yes.
flexible. You know, more flexibility in your back." Now that once you say that, maybe they're based on yoga.
Definitely. A lot of the yoga movements are very natural movements for the body, movements for the spine. You'll often just see babies doing yoga poses because it's just a natural way to move the body. So what makes it yogic without just exercise is that it's mindful, so that you stay aware of how you move and how you breathe and how you strengthen the muscles, where you might not have a muscle that's strong, where you do. Yes. It makes you very
I
aware.
understand why you need mental, like you say. I mean, just doing.
So you don't hurt yourself.
Really? I mean, explain that. I don't know why.
Well, because
doing
sometimes
exercise is an
people could do
exercise.
exercise and they could be pushing through their weights or whatever, and they might be thinking of something else, and before they know it, they could injure a muscle. They could go too far. They could add their too many weights before they're ready, and if they're not really feeling what they're doing as they're doing it, they're not really in their bodies, they're somewhere else. With yoga, you really get in touch with your body. Sometimes people are separated from their body. They eat unhealthy, they exercise unhealthy, they put unhealthy things in, they stress themselves out. In yoga, you stay very aware of how you feel, you stay very aware of the world, what you put out to others, and when you're doing strengthening, especially like lifting weights, you've got to breathe, you work with your breath. If you're straining, you'll be exhaling. Certain ways to move the spine are easier with an inhalation or an exhalation. So it's very, very important to be mindfully aware when you are stretching your muscles and moving.
You know,
for
it's
safety.
interesting. I remember when we were a little small, but he says, I don't know, my friend says not to exercise. Everybody exercise. Oh, my leg and my back. But, you know, there's a thing, and in a little bit it's true, because I always remember that story, because a lot of people, I jog all the time, and, my leg, I hurt my leg. I says, well, you know, I do exercise, but I take it mildly.
Yes,
but a little bit.
there's a balance.
Yeah, that's it's important what you were saying, because I
Yes.
know a good few people, they come in, what happened? You always
Yes.
exercise. I can't take it. My back, I pull my back. And, well, you're supposed to be exercising, you're supposed to be healthy. You're not, coming kvetching about your back.
Some people don't like it. They don't like to exercise. It's a stress, it's a strain. They're not in the right level. They have to be in a level that's comfortable. So from there, with yoga, it's about finding your comfort level, and then you soften. You let go a little bit and you soften into it so that you find the comfort first, then you can explore your depth within it. And the same if you're at the gym. When I work out at the gym, I use my breath, I get centered, because if I don't, I'll hurt something. I have found that to happen if I'm not mindful, if I'm rushing through because I have to get somewhere. If I take my time, if I breathe, whatever I do, if I'm inhaling or exhaling, how I'm approaching that movement, what I'm feeling in my arms or my legs or my body as I do them, so that I'm in touch with myself. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I mean, just on the other hand, it says someone was doing the marathon. And I asked him, how do you go through 26 months? Yeah, but he says, after an hour, it's like a dead zone.
Yeah.
So people don't really are that mindful of themselves. They just get into a trance.
They go, but they are. They're in like a zone because of how they're running. And it is, when I used to run, it would be after about the first 20, 25 minutes, and then you're able to keep going. And a marathon runner, they do a lot of training for that. So they're actually meditating the whole time. It's people who complain or aren't comfortable if they're hurting themselves, people who push too far, who exercise to the point where they don't like it, they're just pushing themselves because they know they have to, and then they might be stressing themselves. If they did a little bit of stretching before and after they're exercising, and just to get themselves centered, going through it, and then recovery afterwards, it would help a lot. So
warming up and cooling
yes,
down.
Yes,
kind of
and massage. Massage helps too, even though some people tell me they feel massaged after my yoga classes, because the way it moves your body, it's almost like a self-massage to cleanse the body. Yeah.
I mean, go into there, because again, like I introduced you, you are one of your three major ideas is a massage. I mean, you always think just to relax, someone just rubs your back, but is it physically important?
It's physically
also?
Very important. It's very healthy for the body, because especially if you exercise a lot, the muscles kind of let off their wastes within the body. When you go through massage, it flushes it through. Our lymph system is a very slow system in the body. So massage helps to speed up that circulation. Get a massage, you drink a lot of water, it flushes the toxins out of the body that have been stored waste from the use of muscles. So the body is constantly regenerating, so it just speeds up the process for people. If they have knots, if certain muscles are injured, you can work those knots out. There's different methods in massage therapy that help to clear up the area of a knotted area or a sore area that might have seized up. Sometimes you have one area of the body that might be impinged, a nerve impinged, all the muscles around it start to guard it. So you start to release and relieve that tension, and then the muscle and the impingement can relax and let go.
And yoga could do that also a little
Together,
bit?
it's yes.
Interesting.
That and water therapy. I always recommend I recommend water therapy in terms of swimming, or like saunas and hot tubs, so that in a warm pool you're able to move your muscles a little more easily. So if I have people who are very arthritic, I always recommend they get into water, whether that be a hot tub to soften the muscles, or swimming so that they have the buoyancy of the water and the resistance of the water. So those are things that I tell people, and the simplest of all is deep breathing and water can help a lot, and good sleep. Those
Exercise
are three.
in the water?
Yes. Well, drinking water is good for the body, breathing is good for the body, getting enough rest is good for the body, and then when you're into exercise, to just be mindful. So yes, I think it should be a mix of an hour of Talmud, 15 minutes of stretching, Talmud,
water, take a water.
Little water, get in the hot tub, take a schwitz, come back.
The schwitz is also good for you? You think just
yes, again, because it removes toxins that are stored in the body over time.
Oh, this is interesting.
So it regenerates the body, absolutely.
Everything you say is almost like the three things, like you say, yoga, there's the right and the wrong. People are stressed. They don't exercise. They don't eat right.
Any exercise is good, yes.
Just a problem with a lot of people. They're just overweight. You hear about obesity and
yep.
And they're stressed
A
out.
lot of it is eating for lots of different reasons, and the kind of food that's available for people. So
diet is important also. I mean, you're not a dietitian, but is that part of your...
No. I was taught to cook by my grandmother, so luckily I cook from scratch. And eating clean is very, very kosher is a real thing. Even if it's a type of kosher in this society now, with mass production of food, kosher, they really knew what they were saying back in the day.
Explain it a little
For
more
kosher,
for people.
for people, being kosher is being clean, eating a certain way that's better for your body. I find Judaism in general, mikvah, kosher, it's all about being clean, back in an era when maybe people weren't as clean as we are now. So I find kosher is very important in terms of the kind of food we eat, the meat we eat, if we eat meat, kind of vegetables we eat, and the kind of mass-produced food that we will have. Different things that we find each era that aren't good for us but have been in our foods forever, salts, sugars, refined flours. So, yeah.
It's also interesting. It's always, when I talk to someone, and I always bring in my commercial because I'm a rabbi, and it's, oh, Judaism says that, thousands of years ago. I mean, I say that in many, many instances. But again, here it's interesting. Here we're talking about health. Goes way back. Does not only 100 years, to go thousands of years back. Well, Judaism said that, and if people follow Judaism. I mean, there's what to talk about, but, that's what I'm saying, the exercise. That maybe they had that, just to end off with an interesting story. And I saw this, that, like yourself, a lot of, Jewish people go into India or in China. So he says, he's looking at the martial arts. And he says, well, I'm going to go where it really started. I think it was in Korea, but don't quote me on the story. And he said, well, he's a secular Jew, but he go to Korea. And they said, well, you got to learn the whole method. You got to learn the history. And the people came from Judah. They said this to him. They came from Judah to teach us this. And he says, what am I doing here? I'll go back to my homeland over here. So, I mean, it's cute. He says it's a true story. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, like eating, go back to kosher.
Back to kosher.
I don't know about exercise. But you say prayer, that's what they say.
Yes.
Praying every day is good for the person.
It is.
Not just rumbling through the prayers, but thinking and meditating.
It connects you into the world. It opens your heart. It brings you in. So.
Yeah. So Judaism has everything in there. I don't know,
think
you say yeshiva people, they don't teach them how to exercise so well, but maybe that's also an important...
Maybe that'll be a modern addition.
Yeah. No, there's always something that's
it's a good modern, healthy addition.
Teach people
being kosher in the body.
Well, I always say, that's why I say when I exercise, people, look at me askance, Rabbi, you're exercising. It's, a healthy soul inside of a healthy body.
You're starting a modern trend. A healthy modern trend.
Well, I mean, really, Rambam, Maimonides, he was a major doctor in medieval times. That's part of his laws. Eat properly, and in the middle you're learning this law and about Sabbath. And he's saying, he has chapters on how to eat and keep the body healthy.
That's Ayurvedic also. The Ayurvedic Eastern science of eating, it's all about digestion and eating, how to combine your foods, times to eat your foods. Yes.
Really?
Different seasons,
there's
eating by season.
There's what to talk about. Maybe
we'll
have to have a class together. Yeah, the Judaism and yoga. In any case, we're out of time. We're having such a good time, so we'll have to ask you back sometime to explore a lot of different ideas.
I'd
but
be
thank
honored.
You for our viewers on behalf of them, that hopefully they'll be healthier. Thank you very much.
Thank you.